So let's cross back to Canberra now and catch up with Senator Arthur Sinodinos, Senator for New South Wales, who's returned to politics this week. I think, Arthur, to much joy, not just from your own colleagues, but to people wishing you well from the other side of the corridor as well after a really terrible battle against ill health. Welcome back, Arthur.
No, thank you, Chris. Work is a form of therapy, so it's good to be back and take the next stage in getting on with normal life, I hope.
You literally have been to hell or back. Can you tell us what it's been like professionally and personally to battle through this fight with cancer?
I think at first you become a bit disoriented and think, where is this going to lead? I had a stage 4 lymphoma, a blood cancer. But the doctor said, look, the prognosis is good, but we've got to treat it very quickly. And because otherwise I'd be dead by Christmas. So I said, well, I'd better get on with it. And so I started very intensive chemo treatment, and then April of last year had a bone marrow transplant to help prevent recurrence. And, my immunity was driven right down. Now I'm building it back up and building my strength up. And while I was away, I kept in touch, obviously, with my office and authorised material, and even watched the odd Sky News program with Chris Kenny and others on the way. So I kept in touch with what was going on. But it is a battle, but you also worry about your family and your friends because they worry for you. And I wanted them to have peace of mind so I could just focus on getting better and doing as much as I can to get back to normal life.
Yeah, so it's great news for you, great news for the Liberal Party, but primarily, of course, great news for your family, your young family as well. So it's great to see, Arthur. Have you been touched and at all surprised by the amount of goodwill that has come from across the aisle on your return?
Well, I've been gratified that that's the case. People have been very decent about it. What I found in going on my own cancer journey is that afterwards, having walked in the shoes of cancer sufferers, you become even more empathetic towards other people and their suffering. I'm more likely now to pick up the phone to someone who's sick and ask them how they're going and have a proper conversation about what they're going through and how they're feeling, having experienced some of it myself. Now, I appreciate what colleagues and friends have said, but I also know that, this is a pretty fiery place. It's a place of contest, of ideas, and, nice things are said about you, but then you have to get back to work.
Indeed. Nice things are said about people, and then a knife arrives in the middle of their shoulder blades. Tell us, Arthur, you know politics better than just about anybody in the country because you've seen it from so many perspectives. You were, of course, a senior bureaucrat, and then famously you were John Howard's reliable and respected chief of staff for the most of his period of government, and now, of course, as a player at cabinet level. While you've been away, while you've been keeping in touch and obviously focusing on your own recovery, has it given you a new perspective on politics? Because those of us who have been in the media and politics full-time over the past couple of years have been surprised just at how absurd and cynical it's become. Does it look even worse to you, having taken that step back?
When you're outside and you see it from the outside, not everything that happens every day in Parliament cuts through, but big events do cut through. And when there are changes of leader, for example, or when there's a major event like a boat arrival or something like that, those sorts of things tend to cut through. So what it was a reminder to me of is that sometimes up here we can get caught up in the weeds, but sometimes it's good to stand back and look at the fundamentals. And remember that it's the fundamentals that ultimately drive how people will feel about the government of the day and what they ultimately want to do in terms of a vote.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think so many in politics and advising around it, and the media as well, get caught up in the intricacies and the details, and you've got to step back and look at those first principles. Now, speaking about that, of course, as Chief of Staff to John Howard, you've got immense experience in the border protection policy area. You know how complex it is to deliver, but how simple some of the messaging needs to be. What are your thoughts on what has transpired this week?
Well, look, the first thing to say is I've said over the years, and I say it again to the Labor Party, border protection is a policy issue. It's not a political issue. People can want to make it a political football if they want, but it's a policy issue. It's a serious issue about sovereignty of our borders. It's about how we balance our obligation to have strong borders with a strong immigration program, a generous refugee and humanitarian program. And you can't get those if the public feel that you've lost control of your sovereignty and lost control of your borders. When the Tampa was changing course and steaming towards Australia, the reaction inside the government was not, oh, whoopee, this is a great political issue coming our way. The reaction was, well, this is a challenge to our national sovereignty. And if we put out the welcome mat, we're sending a signal that ultimately our policy is decided outside Australia and not by Australians. And I think it's an important signal to send, particularly for those of us who think a strong immigration policy is important, a generous refugee and humanitarian program are important, and who think that our identity as a multicultural nation is undermined if it looks like we cannot control our migration intake.
Let me put you then, Arthur Sinodinos, what I think is the best of the Labor Party's argument at the moment, and you tell me why their argument might not be correct. And that is, they say medical evacuations are occurring already. Some 900 have occurred, so nothing is going to change here in practice, and that these new arrangements will only apply to those refugees and asylum seekers already there, not to any new arrivals. So their argument is nothing much is changing, and therefore the government should stress that point in order to deter people smugglers.
Well, if nothing much is changing, why have we had this bill go through? Why have we had the convolutions since before Christmas? The fact of the matter is, Labor wanted to have it both ways. And this is the problem they would face in government. And we saw it the last time they were in government. And this is not so much about the crossbenchers, this is about Labor, the alternative government. And we saw people like Anthony Albanese at one of the past national conferences tearing up and saying that he couldn't turn votes back from memory. Now, the fact of the matter is, unless we run a strong border control policy, we're going to lose the support of the Australian people for all the other good policies I mentioned before. And in the case of the people smugglers, they won't draw the distinction between the existing caseload and new caseload. They'll just say to new people, look, we can outweight the Australian government and get you a result. Just bear with us. Things are changing, and this bill that's just gone through will be used to symbolise that change. That's the sort of unscrupulous people we're dealing with.
See, this is why I don't put Labor Party arguments on border protection very often, because they get smashed out of the park. Honestly, they should just stick with what has worked. I think that's not a political point. This is what the country needs. We need secure borders, as you mentioned, to underpin our generous immigration system. Let me finish up, Arthur Sinodinos, with what I think is a difficult question. I know will be a difficult question for you personally, because I know you know Dave Sharma and know what a quality candidate he was for the seat of Wentworth. He's running there again. But you also know, and you were so loyal to Malcolm Turnbull, that you got out of your sick bed to go down there and try and support him as Prime Minister. Yet Malcolm Turnbull didn't lift a finger to help Dave Sharma get elected in Wentworth. And if he'd done that, perhaps we wouldn't have even had this border protection situation we've got now.
Look, Chris, I think it's true to say that there was a lot of anger, clearly, particularly in that seat, at Malcolm's removal. And I think the danger, and Malcolm, this played into his calculations, and the danger was that he would end up becoming the distraction, the centre of attention in the whole campaign.
Oh, come on, just a letter, just a tweet, just an email.
Well, he had endorsed Dave earlier on and indicated he supported his candidacy. But I think it would have become even more of a circus than the by-election became. I'm now patron senator for Wentworth. I'm working with Dave Sharma to get the electorate back, and we will pull out all stops. And if there's a potential role there for Malcolm and it plays well with the voters, then that's a card that I'm happy to see played.
Arthur, really great to talk to you again. Really great to see you back on deck, and thanks for joining us.
No, thank you, mate. Good luck.
Arthur Sinodinos there, really such a great mind, such a great character. Fantastic to have him back in Parliament. We certainly wish him well, and it was great to get his insights there.